Welcome to Weekly Homilies at St. Joseph Parish in York, Pennsylvania.
As a fair warning, I think there's going to be a good number of stories within this homily, starting off with, I grew up kind of at the tail end of that huge phase of everyone asking, what would Jesus do, and putting WWJD on everything. My favorite response was, well, fashioning a cord of whips and flipping over tables is an option. But today we celebrate the feast day of the dedication of St. John Lateran Basilica. This is the cathedral for the Diocese of Rome. If we take a look back into history, it was gifted to Pope Sylvester I in the 300s by the Emperor Constantine after the legalization of Christianity. This was kind of Constantine's way of saying, hey, our bad, sorry for killing all of you. Here's a whole bunch of gifts. And Constantine ended up giving so many things. Pretty much everything that was ever gifted to Constantine was passed on to Sylvester. And so one of those things was the property of the Lateran family, which was then now the Lateran Palace. And next to it, Constantine said, I can build you a church. How big do you want it? Sylvester said, as big as you can make it. So the thing is huge, absolutely massive. Now, it's named after St. John the Baptist, but commonly known as St. John Lateran for, St. John the Baptist and the family who originally had the property. So there is no such person as St. John Lateran. So, second story. I've traveled to Rome a couple of times. My first time with my classmates from the seminary, and we're walking through St. John Lateran, and there's this group from England just checking things out, and so I figured, play a trick. So I said to one of my friends, loud enough so that way they could hear, I said, man, St. John Lateran is my favorite saint. He's so awesome. And this British couple turns around and goes, who is he? We were trying to figure out who this is. And I go, oh my gosh, make up this huge thing. And they're like, I'm sorry, it's not. And then explain the history. But this is, the home of the chair of St. Peter. Here is the Pope's cathedral, the Pope's cathedra is here at St. John Lateran. All the major papal, celebrations within the Diocese of Rome are celebrated at St. John Lateran. So often we think of St. Peter's. St. Peter's is here for the entire universal church, while St. John Lateran is primarily for Rome. Which then begs the question, why are we celebrating the dedication of St. John Lateran's Basilica in York, PA? It's first that recognition of the universality of Rome, that all of us, as baptized Catholics, are unified first and foremost in the body of Jesus Christ, and then through our allegiance to his vicar on earth, the Pope, that visible sign of unity amongst the Christians. And the second, why is it a church? Why are we celebrating a physical thing? It's not like we're celebrating Saints Peter and Paul or St. Joseph or anything like that. It's because of the great importance that we have for a physical place. We as humans, we're physical. We're bodies and souls. This is why all 7 sacraments have something physical about them. You feel the water rushing over your head. You hear the words of absolution. You taste the Eucharist. Everything has a physical connection that we can have that sensual experience of grace. And think of all the sacramentals, these things that we can hold, that we can wear, that we can touch, to have a physical encounter through that. And so it is with our churches. Yes, as St. Paul says in the second reading, we are the church. We are the living stones But we, as the living stones, can't do a whole lot without the physical stones of a place where we can gather, a place where we can set apart, a place where we can recognize this is God's home. God resides here. If we take a look back into the Old Testament, back during the time of the Exodus, and we have the tent of meeting, here's this place where God resides. They build the tabernacle. Here is this place where God resides. Build the temple. Here is this place where God resides. Yes, God is present everywhere, but we come into a physical place to have that physical interaction. In the tabernacle of the Old Testament and in the temple of the Old Testament, there is the presence of God in the Ark of the Covenant, in the lit candles of the menorah, and in the smoke of the incense that was symbolic of the presence of God in the Shekinah, as we read in the Old Testament, that passed into the temple after its dedication. And this recognition that God is present here now. It is entirely the same for us today, that we need to be here in a physical church, to come before our Lord in recognition that this is where we come to encounter Him. Yes, we can encounter Him at our homes, in the park, in the woods, but it's here that He is physically, sacramentally present to us, so much more than He was to His people in the Old Testament. Because here He has given His very body, blood, soul, and divinity. And this is why, my brothers and sisters, it's so important that we come to Mass each and every Sunday to be physically present. And it's just a gentle reminder that if we're away and we just think, I can watch the live stream and that does not fulfill your Sunday obligation. We're not physically here. We need one another. We need the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. We need to come into that encounter with Him. Which brings me to my last point. One last story. So I was on another trip and was in one of the Dominican churches. And a friend of mine and I were over in one of the side chapels praying before the Blessed Sacrament. And this American tourist group came into the church. They're loud and carrying on. He was nice and quiet before. And then all of a sudden the tour guide looks, sees my buddy and I, we're both in our cassocks, and he goes, "Shh. If you look to your left, 2 priests in their natural habitat." So, thanks, jerk, And then as soon as they walked past, continued to carry on as if God is not present there. Do we recognize that God is present here? Do we take that time to come into that encounter with Him, to enter into the silence, that language of God in which He speaks to us? He speaks to us in the silence. My brothers and sisters, as we celebrate this feast of the memorial, or the feast of the dedication of John Lateran's Basilica, let us thank God for the great gift that we have here at St. Joe's of having a physical church, of having a place to come into contact with Him in the tabernacle, in the Eucharist, in all of the sacraments. And let us enter into that in the silence of our hearts, recognizing that this place is sacred to the Lord, that this is God's house, that He desires us to be here and desires us to encounter Him.
Thank you for listening to our weekly homilies at St. Joseph Parish in York, Pennsylvania. To learn more about us, visit us at www.sjy.org. Find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.